Welcome to Reaper's Creepers. Step into the shadows, where tales of the unknown unfold. Relax, listen, and drift into the dark. Hey there, Reddit. Talking about the bizarre to others always tends to remove a bit of the gnawing feeling that surrounds it, even if the respite that results is brief. I've worked as a private investigator for around 5 or 6 years now, running my own business. It's usually a pretty bad idea to just up and start an independent PI company as your gateway to the job. In fact, it's pretty darn stupid. But I live in a town that's small enough that I was able to make it work. My first year or so was pretty rocky as I tried to adjust to the job, but having a couple of friends in the field to give me pointers here and there definitely helped. I eventually began to hit my stride, and as my reputation increased, so too did my client base. I won't be specific about where I live, nor will I use any real names. As a PI, people come to me with some pretty personal stuff, and it's universally taboo to just go sharing the specifics with the world. The extent that I'll admit is that I'm in Canada and that I'm in a small, semi-remote town surrounded by vast, boreal forest. Not the kind you'd go exploring or hiking through with friends, but the kind that you would stay away from because, much like the stereotype, there are bears and caribou all over the place. Trust me, caribou will mess your day up seriously bad. So, with that little bit of preamble out of the way, I suppose I'll start. I tend to get a lot of cases from paranoid spouses, and most I'll take, however absurd. I'm in no position to turn down a paying customer, and when they turn out to be correct, it always feels good to help them out, an unfaithful partner. This case, despite having a reasonably explainable conclusion, was creepy enough to have definitely caused me to think a little more about what to accept and what to decline. Roughly 2 years ago, I get a cold call from what sounds like an older man. He asks to make sure he's called the right place, and when I tell him he has, he immediately launches to a particularly long-winded rant about how his wife is plotting against him and how she's planning to take him out. I try to get him to calm down and ask when he would be able to come over to the office so we could discuss things over a coffee, what he should bring, hash out whether or not this was a legitimate case, and if so, negotiate a fee. He's adamant that he needs to see me as soon as possible, so he comes in a couple of hours later. I don't have any cases at the time, so I'm all for it. He's an older gentleman, around his late 50s, early 60s probably, and is visibly shaken when he shows up. We talk for a little while, and he's definitely calmed down by this point, but he's still obviously frightened. He tells me that his wife has been going out to meet with other elderly women for a sort of book club type deal, and that he's sure that they're all out for his blood. Things get really interesting when he reveals that every morning around 4 a.m., he's woken up by an abnormally loud sound, like dogs barking and growling frantically. He tells me that he always wakes up to see his wife standing in the bedroom doorway, and that 2 other elderly women, resembling a few of her friends, are always standing motionless behind her, making no movements, just staring. The creepy part is that his wife is still in bed with him, sleeping. They don't move as long as he doesn't, but he tells me that as soon as he performs anything noticeable, they stumble off before he has a chance to put his glasses on to get a better look. The few times that he had gone to check, he found his back door opened, but never anything else out of place. I'm a little weirded out, and at first think it may be sleep paralysis, but the fact that a previously closed door is open and that he is able to effortlessly move rules that out. I ask if he has a carbon monoxide detector in his room. He tells me he does, and that it hasn't ever gone off. I ask about things like his address, when he usually leaves, the location of her book club, pictures of his wife, her friends, things like that. We come to an agreement. I take the case, and he goes off on his way. I head off to his place that night and park my car on his street in a location in which I can see his front door and the gate leading into his backyard. I set up my camera and turn on a podcast. Since I have to be there before he goes to sleep to ensure I don't miss it, it's possible that they could arrive before 4 o'clock. I'm out there for around 6 hours with no signs of any activity. The roads are dark, save for dim, country streetlights, and more or less barren. There's this almost piercing feeling of silence and isolation. Not unlike the town had suddenly become entirely deserted, like I'm the only living thing outside on that night. My podcast had long ended, and a permeating essence of dread enticed me to turn the music that had replaced it off, for fear of unspeakable whispers worming their way into the silence between guitar strums. 3:30 sharp, and almost as if on cue, the sound of a dog barking nearly gives me a heart attack. What's worse is how incredibly loud and oddly discordant it is. That is, it's odd until I realize that it's multiple dogs, as if every dog on the block started barking in eerie unison. This is when I catch a glimpse of them in my rear view. 2 small, shriveled figures and one taller, more lithe one, all slowly stumbling across the sidewalk, all clad in white dresses, appearing so suddenly, it's like NPCs have just entered my draw distance. The tint on my windows ensures they don't notice me as they pass by, but I'm nonetheless silent as a mouse, deathly afraid that one might peer over into my window as they pass. Their footsteps echo as they pass my car, and as they do, my blood runs cold. It is not, in fact, 3 old ladies. It is 2 old ladies, dragging along one lifeless, stark white mannequin, rigid like a corpse, fresh from the grave, and dressed as the old man's wife. I try to shake myself out of my daze and begin to take a few pictures with one cam, video them with the other. Sure enough, they turn right down his driveway, their mannequin in tow, and one of them unlocks the back gate, vanishing from view. I check the footage and pictures to make sure they're clear. Trying to get over the horrid bizarreness of the whole situation, I try to think of something, since it's obviously not a good idea just to leave the old couple there with a pair of creepy old ladies who are probably suffering from dementia or something. Since it appears they're usually watching him for a half hour or so, I assume they've probably no intent to harm him, but one can never be sure. I pull out my cell and call up his phone, hoping to try to drive them out. A few minutes later, they're shambling away down the street, mannequin grinding against the pavement. I wait until they're out of view before letting out a breath of relief. The guy doesn't initially believe me when I tell him what happened, but I show him the pictures and video, and he goes pale. Despite the definite creep factor involved, he reacts instead by letting out the deepest sigh of relief I think I've ever heard. He mumbles something, and I can see tears starting to run down his cheeks. He smiles a little melancholically and thanks me, saying that he has to apologize to his wife for not trusting her and not talking to her about it first. I'm not entirely sure what happened after, but I assume he took the photos to the someone as the visit stopped happening after that. I'm not sure of the details, but apparently the women had pretty much gone off their rockers due to old age. His wife had given one of them keys in case they ever wanted to come over. I honestly don't understand the logic behind this one, other than she's old, I guess. Either way, I believe the 2 of them are in a home of some kind now, and the husband made up with his wife pretty easily. I have plenty more where that comes from, and from here on out it only gets weirder. If you guys are interested, I'll probably post more. Hell, I'll probably post more, regardless, just for my own peace of mind more than anything. Wow. I certainly was not expecting this to blow up as big as it has. All that I can really say is that I'm glad you guys enjoyed my last post enough to want more. It feels really good, finally being able to share this stuff with others. I'd like to get the subject of pictures out of the way, First, as I've had quite a few comments asking about them, the pictures contain numerous personal details and a few defining features that might allow you to deduce my clients and my own location. Not only this, but sharing them would almost be like breaking an unspoken bond of confidentiality between me and my clients. It just wouldn't feel right morally. But enough of that. I'll try to get right into it. I don't believe in the occult. I don't believe in the paranormal or anything of that sort. The case I'm about to describe did not change this. You really have to put a lot of trust in your senses, what you've personally seen or heard as a PI, and bogging those very senses down with deduction spotlighting supernatural intervention is a pretty piss-poor decision if you want to get anywhere. You see, I do, however, have my weird personal superstitions and idiosyncrasies. Wouldn't really be human if I didn't. I try and keep them separate from my job, but sometimes they pop up in the back of my mind regardless, picking and drilling at the gray matter in my skull in a desperate attempt to burrow their way back inside. For example, I sometimes feel that reality stops functioning correctly in complete isolation. That, when things are left completely unobserved for a long amount of time, the unknown, unseen spaces cease to exist. Stuff that shouldn't be able to physically happen is suddenly no more than child's play and unwelcome things that have no right existing play their fickle little games with us. I don't try to think about it too much, and I most certainly don't try to give the stupid little thought any power. Nonetheless, there's always the occasional case in which the idea is particularly tempting to indulge. It's the middle of summer and the cicadas are chirping in their monotonous choir, like a million audio tapes put on never-ending, ear-rending repeat. The summers are fairly cold up here, but at least there's no snow. I'm sitting in my office, finishing up one of my previous cases. Just general reports left, lots of paperwork, boring stuff that seems to cause the world to drown in a cacophony of summer insects. The tedium is broken when my phone begins to ring. I pick it up, only to hear the voice of one of my PI friends on the other end. We chat casually for a few minutes, mostly just me trying to get my mind off of the writing pains in my wrist, but it's obvious that he's called for a reason. He explains that he's been on a missing person case, a small boy, around the age of 4. His mother and father had divorced a few years ago, and his mother is currently holed up here in my area. The boy has apparently been missing for quite a while now. The police had been contacted first, but they turned up nothing. After a week passes with no sign of a missing person, you kind of have to start assuming the worst. Nevertheless, we're usually the last resort for these cases. So my buddy goes asking around, and apparently he manages to dig up a couple of accounts saying that the kid was seen boarding an olive green SUV with a woman looking to be in her early 30s, just hours before his disappearance was reported. Nobody thought to note the license plate. His dad, my friend tells me, had left his son home alone for a half hour or so to run out for groceries. Why he didn't take his son along with him, I don't know. At first I thought it might be deliberate, like he had for some reason done it on purpose. Of course, the human brain works weird sometimes, and dumb little human errors are always possibilities. I can only imagine the grief that must be felt after realizing one of those tiny bursts of idiocy may have caused something so heart-wrenching. Long story short, he matches the description of the woman. Short, mid-30s, long brown hair, overall rather average-looking, to a fair amount of other women. One sticks out, though: the boy's mother. The child's father had been granted sole custody of the kid. Apparently the kid's mom had a little cabin out here, which she would regularly visit and spend days' worth of time in without alerting her husband. And whenever she was back home, she'd either be asleep or out somewhere. So my buddy says he wants to team up for this one. Split the pay. He's in a slightly larger town and the closest one to mine, but that's still a good 5-hour drive. Since he still has a few leads over on his end, he wants me to check out the mother, see if anything comes of that. It appears to me at this point that the case is pretty cut and dry, so I accept. He emails me the address and a picture of the kid and his mother, and I finish up my paperwork before setting off. I drive around, semi-lost for a few minutes before I finally catch sight of the gravel road that breaks through the wall of bark created by the forest's border. I glance down at my phone and sigh, placing it into my pocket. Guess it was stupid to expect this to be on Google Maps. Now I always despise having to go into the forest. As I begin to slowly pull down the path, towering green giants blotting out the sun overhead, I'm starting to regret taking this case. The gravel slowly turns to dirt, and the small break in the tree line slowly begins to disappear at my back. It's dim in here. Dense pines doing a damn good job of casting an impenetrable veil of shade over the woods. Now, don't get me wrong. The Canadian boreal forests, and this one is no exception, are absolutely stunningly beautiful. Birds chirp their cheerful tunes. Small rock faces jut out from the land like Mother Nature's own sculptures, and streams of sparkling clear water babble across the rocks into cute little waterfalls, and occasionally picturesque lakes and rivers. But that's exactly why I hate these forests more than any other. More than anything, it always, without fail, seems like some horrible, sprightly facade. Like the entire forest is attempting to scrape this movie set together in order to offset the constant gnawing that I feel at the back of my neck and in the very core of my stomach whenever I come in here. The silhouette of a small building finally begins to come into view off on the horizon. So with a small sigh, I park my car and get out. As much as I'd love to stay cooped up in that metal haven of protection, I am here on a private investigation job. I do have to remain relatively covert. That's not happening if a car just suddenly pulls up onto the front lawn of your isolated cabin. As I get a little closer, I begin to notice that something is off about the trees. I can't place exactly what it is. They just seem strange somehow. The path eventually opens up into a small clearing, a makeshift wooden gate sitting at the end of the path. It's not stopping anybody, as there are no walls on either side of it. Its only purpose seems to be presenting a tattered "No Trespassing" sign. Past the gate is the cabin. It looks to be in surprisingly good shape, and from the outside appears rather modern. In front of it is a small patch of grass, which acts as a parking space, and a few areas in which it's been worn down by tires, the tracks leading right to the gate, and the path I've just come down. Slowly but surely, my eyes drift up from the patch of grass to the car that's been parked in it, my heart suddenly beginning to dance around in a mixture of joy and dread. Not surprisingly, it's an olive green SUV. I pull my camera up to my face and peer through the viewfinder. The SUV, the license plate. I snap a picture of each. Slowly but surely, the frame drifts over to the cabin. I snap a picture, and it's at this exact moment that I realize the front door has been wide open this entire time. I go quiet on instinct, the surrounding area suddenly feeling like it's been hit with a blast of cold air. Then I hear it, a faint humming coming from inside. Soft, like a woman's voice. Once I hear it, I suddenly become unable to stop hearing it. It's a haunting, drifting tune, equal parts melodic and eerie. Every once in a while, it stops or skips a little bit, as if its source is running out of breath or having voice cracks. Before I really even know it, I'm taking a step forward. I know it's a stupid idea, but my legs are moving faster than my mind. Just a little peek, I tell myself. Just one peek to satiate my curiosity, that's it. The cabin looms over me as I get closer. The grass crunches under my feet until finally, just barely, the inside of the building begins to come into view. I stop dead in my tracks. Branches. It takes a moment to register, but there are tree branches covering the floor. When I say covering, I mean covering. These are not sticks. They are long, spindly, thin tree branches, deliberately cut off of their trunks. Like a natural line, my gaze follows them to the single piece of furniture in the room. A small, white coffee table and a CD player perched on top, and I realize why the humming sounded like it was skipping. The trees around me suddenly feel like they're closing in on every side, like the earth below my feet is trying to swallow me whole. I don't take another moment to sit and deliberate on it. I just book it out of there as fast as I can goddamn will myself. I launch towards my car, slam the door shut, put it into reverse, and punch it out of there. That place simply felt wrong. The first thing I did was contact the police. I sure as hell was not going back there, but there was no way I just gonna let it sit there like that. They investigated and were just as weirded out as I was, but ultimately didn't turn up anything of use. The house was deserted, save for the sea of branches, the white coffee table, and the lone CD player. The SUV, too, was near pristine, not unlike a new car. Investigations continued for a while, but it was more or less a dead end. Nobody ever returned to the cabin. My buddy's leads never panned out either, and the child's mother suddenly went missing as well. We never found any of them. In the end, things unfortunately had to be called off. I most definitely have a few theories and ideas on what exactly went down with that godforsaken place, but none of them can be proven, and I'd rather not make this any longer than it needs to be, so I'll let you guys speculate for now. Edit. Since a lot of you requested it, here's the prevailing theory I have. It's totally unfounded and has a number of holes, but what can you do? If I'm to try to inject some semblance of sense into this, I'd say that the mom most likely did kidnap the kid. We ran the plate on the SUV, and it was registered to her. The police searched everywhere, too. They turned over the branches, looked in the car, the works. Nothing. No fingerprints, residue of any kind, nothing. The best I can assume is that the woman took the kid up here, probably gathered up anything important, food, water, precious jewels, etc., and set up this whole scene just to confuse anybody who tried to find her, to throw us off her trail. She then took her kid and either managed to somehow sneak a ride out of town or just straight up went into the woods. If it's the latter, they're both probably dead. There's still a whole bunch in there that's assumed and has no supporting evidence, but it's the most logical thing I can think of. Hello again, nosleep. It's been a bit of a long day, so I thought I'd blow off some steam by recording another one of my past cases for you guys. First things first, I've been getting a lot of requests for my personal theories on what happened, as well as a little of elaboration. I've updated my last post with what I think could have occurred, and I will continue to share my thoughts at the end of my posts from now onwards. Just keep in mind that they're going to be largely speculative due to a usual lack of solid evidence. Apart from domestic and missing persons, I tend to get a lot of cases from local businesses for things like fraud, making sure their employees are legitimate with their sick days, and running background checks on potential hires. One of my more frequent clients is this quaint little antique store that sits in one of the less populated parts of town, silently minding its own business on a crooked and forgotten street corner. The couple running the joint may have a pretty sparse employee population, but they're nothing if not thorough with those few workers they do have. It's mid-autumn, and shivering winds have begun to drift into town. We have very few trees up here that would deign to become dyed that calming autumn orange, but the few that would are beautifully eye-catching splashes of color amongst a sea of pine green. The Tims residing under one such tree is where I've been called out by the aforementioned couple. I sip my coffee, patiently watching the door for their arrival. I greet them when they eventually arrive, and they settle down at my table without buying anything. I've worked with them before at this point, and I know better than to try to break the ice with small talk, so we get right into business. They've recently hired somebody to start working night shifts at their shop. As far as I know, they don't get much traffic in the daytime to begin with, so why they thought they needed someone to run the register after sundown, I've no clue. It is what it is, however, and as per usual, they don't trust the kid yet. I had already been hired to do a background check on this guy back when they first hired him. He was a good enough kid, from what I could tell. No criminal past, always seemed to go straight home from school. Never left the house much at all, and when he did, it was usually just walks or grocery runs. So the couple wants me to sit outside the storefront on the kid's first night, working to make sure he didn't neglect his post. I tried to tell them that not only would investing in a security camera be cheaper, I could install it for them to boot. They weren't interested. I made a mental note but didn't press things. They go on to tell me that they'd like me to run a mystery shopper type deal. Go in near the end of the guy's shift, buy something, and test out how well the kid deals with customers. I've been inside the antique shop a few times before, and whenever I'm approached by the couple that runs the place, I try to take as many measures as I can to avoid entering the establishment again. I'm initially reluctant to accept this case for that reason. I'm a little bit short on funds, though, so I resign myself and take the case. After taking a nap, I drive up to the street on which the shop resides before the employee in question arrives, making sure my car can't be seen from behind the counter. It meant I was also unable to see him, but that was the price that had to be paid if I wanted to test out his customer service skills later in the night. There's only one door anyway, so I'd know if he left regardless. He drives up about a half hour later, around 11:30, and switches off with the couple, the two of them heading home for the night. The store looks quite normal from the outside. It's a small, low-budget mom and pop type affair, a cramped little place. A single door leads to the inside of the shop, a rickety wooden staircase next to it, leading up to the vacant room turned storage space above. Even while sitting purposefully in my car, eyes trained on the chipping blue paint that frames the antique store's entrance, I can feel the reason that I don't like hanging around this place. It's like an unbearable wave of loneliness, radiating from the shop with unrelenting sorrow. The sun has long since disappeared, incandescent light emanating from the inside of the store like a beacon floating in a vast sea of melancholy. My mind plays its cruel little tricks on me a few times, shadows dancing playfully in the trees that act as the store's backdrop. Minutes turn to hours, and after what seems like an eternity, his shift is finally just about to end. The door is not opened a single time, neither for him nor customer. Letting out a sigh, I open my car door and take a step out into the pale moonlight. Chilling air bites painfully at my nose as I close the door behind me, shoving my hands into the pockets of my jacket to hide them from the gale. My footsteps are my only companion as I cross the street, gradually approaching the fittingly antiquated storefront. A small bell chimes as I push the door open, eyes instantly assaulted by dim yellow light. I'm immediately overcome with an intense desire to leave. The inside of this shop induces a phenomenon not unlike that I tend to experience in the forests, a horrible sense that things just aren't right. There's hardly any free space to maneuver, tables and shelves overflowing with an uncountable amount of dusty ornaments. Native sculptures sit lopsidedly on the creaking wooden floor. Cracked porcelain dolls glare unflinchingly with their cold, unfeeling eyes. In the corner, an aged clock tediously ticks away. There's nobody behind the counter. In that moment, time seems to freeze. My eyes flit around the store frantically. I begin to maneuver around the store. Nowhere. He isn't hiding. Nobody behind the counter, no other exits. Nobody left since he arrived. My breathing starts to speed up, chest moving in and out in disjointed rhythm. The small wooden dog on the counter stares at me with an unrelenting gaze, the abyss behind its smooth black eyes mocking my efforts. The floor creaks. I pivot around. Another creak. Footsteps. The store's empty. Another footstep. I swallow deeply, the steps slowly beginning to get closer and closer. My heart beats at a sickening pace, my eyes turning up as I gradually begin to register what's happening. With each footstep, dust flutters down from the ceiling. There's someone upstairs. It is not an animal. I can very clearly hear the sound of a boot with each step. I begin to back out of the store, grasping behind me for the knob. I don't want to turn my back to anything in here. That thought begins to nag at my brain again. I don't want anything in here to stop being perceived, at least while I'm in the same space as it. The door creaks open behind me, and I step out into the dark night. The cold autumn air is almost welcoming. Letting out a long breath of relief, I close the door tightly and turn my attention to the staircase. Now, legally, I'm not allowed to go into their storage. I haven't been given express permission, and so entering that private property would obviously be against the law. But something is in there that should absolutely not be there. I peer up the stairs, pulling my phone from my pocket and flicking on the flashlight. Intense white light envelops the staircase, and I almost immediately become paralyzed. A jack-in-the-box stares back at me from the top step. Its worn cloth inhabitant sits gleefully on its spring, jutting from the top of the small plastic cube. It looks down upon me, lips wrenched upwards into a twisted facsimile of a smile. I am absolutely not hanging around this place any longer. Stuffing my phone into my pocket, I rush for my car, throwing open the door and shuffling inside. After checking to make sure there's nobody in my back seat, I let out a small sigh of relief before immediately turning my eyes back towards the staircase. I wasn't going up there, but that didn't mean I wasn't going to wait for whoever was up there to come down. Just as I'm beginning to calm down, just as I'm trying to think this through, logically, the front door of the shop opens and out walks the kid. I instinctively get out of the car and move to his side, just as he's beginning to lock up. My mind swims with millions of questions, but above all, my first thought is to just finish this damn job. I can think later. I ask him if I could just quickly get in and buy something before he closes, that I already know what I'd like and won't take long. He is quite obviously taken aback by my sudden appearance and request, but I play it off as having woken up a little late and rushing over because there was something I had my eye on for a while now, and I wanted it before someone else bought it. He obliges and I follow him back in. I study him as he sets up behind the register, but he looks completely normal, like nothing has happened at all. I grab the little dog on the counter and hand it over for him to ring up, chatting with him and asking a few questions, to try to judge if there's any shake in his voice or anything. Nothing. He talks like a normal kid. In fact, he's pretty personable. I thank him and take the little wooden ornament, and that's that. In the downtime between talking to him and waiting to report to my clients, I did actually manage to form some kind of theory as to what occurred. It's tenuous at best and assumes quite a bit, but it's the best I've got. It's possible the kid was hiding behind the counter when I entered. When I began to check the shop, he may have snuck out behind my back and gone upstairs. He may have meant to steal from the storage room as he was closing up shop, but my presence caused him to freak out. Perhaps because he had already hidden on instinct, he was afraid of having to explain if he was found, so he rushed up to the storage room. When I eventually went back to the car, he may have used that opportunity to sneak back into the store to act like he was leaving. There are, of course, many problems with this. For one, why was the jack-in-the-box there? How would he have known when I was going back to my car? Why hide up there in the first place when he could have hidden behind the store and had an easier time? How would he have even snuck out of the store in the first place when the bell on the door didn't ring? The more I think about it, the less sense it makes. I wasn't too specific on things, but I did advise the couple that I had heard footsteps up there and that they should watch the storage room to make sure nothing's stolen. They didn't seem surprised and just kind of nodded. Whatever the hell was happening there, I hope I never have to go back again. From Reaper's Creepers, the unknown retreats and the shadows release you for now. Join us again to drift deeper into the dark.